Greg, thank you for sitting down with Ward 2 Democrats.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm enjoying this.
I appreciate you coming to Ward 2. We're at Prego Again on 17th Street.
Yeah.
I'm having a conversation with Greg Jackson here. Greg, the purpose of today is to allow you to speak to Ward 2 voters and have you tell them why they should vote for you. Let's tell Ward 2 who you are and why you're running for at-large council.
Yeah, well, I'm Greg Jackson. I'm running for the Democratic seat of DC Council at large. I'm really running to make DC safer, more affordable, and basically a district where all folks can thrive. Right now, there are certain parts of the city that are thriving. There are certain areas that are safer than others, but I think we're all struggling with affordability. And I love this place. This is where I call home. Ward 2 is where I lived for 3 years on 4th and M Street, 440 M Street. And really, some of my best memories and experiences came from Ward 2. And so I'm excited to be here today to talk about my vision for the district and why I'm running.
Tell us a little bit about your background and tell us how that background translates into you being the right candidate for DC right now.
I was born in Richmond, Virginia, moved to DC right after college, went to University of Virginia, was a lawn resident and a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. But like so many folks from Virginia, DC is the big city. And I was someone who cared a lot about student government and service, and DC is the hub for that. So I moved here straight out of college, worked on a bunch of campaigns, helped to found DC for Obama, which was the big organization that helped elect Barack Obama, and then got really excited about political change, moved my way up through the ranks, worked in the DNC for a year and a half. But throughout that journey, while living in Shaw in Ward 2, when walking home in 2013, I was caught in a crossfire and shot and nearly killed. And the bullet that hit me hit 2 arteries, and I went from having the greatest time ever in DC to fighting for my life and spending 6 months in DC hospitals, frankly, recovering. And when I came out, I had to make a tough decision. Do I continue to work in this campaign world, or do I focus on fixing real problems that our community is facing? So I decided to leave campaigns and serve the city. I was appointed as Mayor Bowser's youngest cabinet member, her director of community relations, her first term. I spent 2 years doing everything from fixing potholes and paving alleys and building dog parks to also addressing, violence and fires in our communities. So really enjoyed that. Along that, to about 5 years in service in the city until one of my family friends was shot and killed. So I pivoted from DC service to more policy focus and began to advocate on Capitol Hill. After 3 years, I was able to get the first bill passed on gun violence in 30 years, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, made historic investments in mental health and gun control measures and domestic violence measures, and so many just amazing things came out of that bill. And from there, I was appointed by President Biden to be his advisor on gun violence prevention and violent crime. And so I spent 487 days in the White House running the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, advising him, also traveling the country, helping communities deal with violence and violent crime. And really in that time learned about the evidence-based practices that are working across the country. But even during that time, DC was still trailing behind. And while I worked at the White House, my home was shot up 13 times. And I'll never forget that feeling of being in the West Wing in a meeting, getting a call from the MPD that my house has been shot up, and how ironic that was, and how that was a reminder of how much more we still have to do here locally. When Trump came and cleared everybody out, I had to make a decision. Do I consult and lobby, or do I try to do more to help our city? And so I decided to run for council to really take the lessons I learned around public safety, around constituent services, around affordability, housing, and education through my mentorship work to the district and help us improve.
So it sounds like there's a few things there that really stand out to me. It's a unique experience, particularly regarding public safety. So let's start there. What strategies would you pursue to improve public safety and community well-being in Ward 2? Second question is what evidence-based practices do you see DC not doing that you help implement?
Sadly, it's a long list. When I came to the White House, the president gave me a $17 billion budget, and I was able to oversee a government approach to gun violence. And DC hasn't done that. We're still talking about punitive strategies like curfews, sentencing, and we do summer youth employment, but the extent of how we focus on preventing violence is very, very limited, and we're still operating in the 90s. And so, what I would like to do is first get everyone bought into a public health, people-centered approach that brings all of government to the table, whether that's Department of Employment Services, Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Education. Everything that the government has should play a role in keeping our community safer, whether it's our youth, our residents, our seniors, or our veterans. So that's the first big step. Secondly, is that we're not doing enough to support families after they're being traumatized by violence. We know that the person who's most likely to cause a future incident is someone who's been traumatized in the first place. And from that, right now, we're forgetting about our families. One of my mentees, Karan Brown, was shot and killed. And sadly, I met with his mother and supported her, helped organize a vigil for her son. And then her second son was shot and killed just a
Wow.
few years later. And I went back to console her. And I'll never forget, she's still living in the same apartment. She hadn't received any support, any therapeutic support, and her children are still in the same conditions. And it was a reminder that someone who lost two children in a very high profile way, we're still not getting the support and resources to help them navigate to a healthier quality of life. And we have to do more for victims and families that have been traumatized. Even me, the extent of what I got was some financial reimbursement for my surgery, but I didn't even get a police report until 9 years after I was shot.
Wow.
And so right now we are just leaving people out on their own after tragedy. Another major thing is that we're not thinking about accountability beyond the individuals. So what Baltimore is doing really great, Chicago's even doing it, is that they're figuring out how to keep guns from getting into our communities in the first place. And they're doing that by upstream accountability. And this is what I worked with cities on from the White House is how do you intercept guns that are being trafficked into your community? How do you go after those gun dealers that basically are selling these illegal guns that are floating into our city? And also, how do you go after the manufacturers that are playing a role? Right now in Chicago, I'm working with the Illinois legislature on what's called the Rifle Act, where we're holding gun manufacturers accountable to paying taxes and paying fees that will go into help communities that have been traumatized by the weapons they've sold. So we have to think about how do we be innovative and making sure everyone is accountable, not just that 12-year-old that gets a gun. Because there's only one gun store in DC. And when you think about all the carjackings, the shootings, where are the source of these guns are just as important as why the crime is happening and how we fix it. The other big thing is when we think about crime in the district, we focus primarily on surveillance and patrol and not clearance rates. I can't even recall the last time I've seen a report or a media hit that talks about, hey, we've hit a historic number of crimes solved. No, what we talk about is how many people we have on the streets and how many helicopters and cars have we purchased. And we have to get back to what police departments are for. And frankly, that's keeping us safe by solving crimes and serving communities. And that comes from investing in crime gun intelligence, investing in inspectors, investing in investigators, thinking about everyone that can help solve the crime is way more crucial than just the patrol and surveillance that we're seeing now. Beyond that, I think our mental health is a major challenge in the district and really in every major city, but we have to invest more in our youth mental health and recognizing that too many of our young folks are dealing with depression, anxiety, trauma, frankly, real trauma, as well as some of the repercussions and the ripples from the COVID pandemic. And if we want our young folks or younger adults even to live in a healthier, safer life, we have to make sure that we're thinking about their mental wellness and their behavior as much as we are about cracking down on them when they make a mistake or lash out. So those are just a few things. When I was in the White House, I created what was called the Safer States Agenda. It had 15 policies and 31 states actually passed those policies. I tried to bring DC in to review those policies, and 3 members of council showed up and they were all resistant. And so we have right now a council and a leadership that is not only resistant, but really dismissive of evidence-based strategies that are working as close as Baltimore. And I want to shift that as council.
You touched a little bit on a people-centered approach, right? And that overlaps with education, overlaps with parks and recs, overlaps with public spaces such as our rec centers and so forth. So can you speak a little bit to how your approach might also address, we'll say, education as well as public spaces
Yeah.
and those programs?
Yeah. Well, I think, look, when we think about people centered, it's not just a kumbaya thing. It's about shifting behavior, right? And you have to work with people to help shift their behavior. And there are a lot of evidence-based programs that do that very well. One that's really, really popular that Baltimore is doing well, Boston did well, are what are called cognitive behavioral therapy programs.
Okay.
DC only has one, which is called Pathways, but it's been extremely successful. But we should be expanding those programs that work with folks who already have a history of maybe harmful or violent, or I go as far as even criminal activity or behaviors, and work with them to help shift their behaviors before they commit the next crime, especially if we're thinking about young folks that are in high school or middle school, right? Like, how do we shift behavior as much as we're thinking about cracking down and accountability? But beyond that, there's another way you can shift behavior, and that's by addressing the root causes that lead to that type of behavior and the risk factors, frankly, that lead to that. And a lot of it is safe spaces, recreation, opportunity to grow, to thrive, to be exposed to new experiences. And I actually spent 2 years of my experience in DC government as the community engagement director and communications director for DPR. And I tell you what, there's nothing more unifying than play, right?
Yes.
Like when people play football or basketball or kickball, soccer, like it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, black, white, it doesn't, you're from this neighborhood or that neighborhood. We are trying to win this game, or I'm trying to beat you. And it was so amazing how playing and recreation just was like the ultimate, I don't know, like what's the word I'm thinking about? But
Community builder.
yeah, it builds community and it just puts everybody at the same playing field. And I think that is a beautiful thing that we have to lean into, whether it's water parks for our families, we have to figure out how do we create more spaces for us to come together as a community and build trust and love and excitement and fun and competition.
Yeah.
And so we did that with DPR. I helped create the Fit DC initiative. So all the great 5Ks and stuff that folks go to, that was my job. I actually designed the Fit DC logo. But beyond that, I helped with summer camps and really helped us figure out how do we expand that infrastructure, not just for fitness, but because it's a way to build community and bring the neighborhoods together. And I think that's a huge opportunity.
So we talk about that very issue, right? And one thing about Ward 2 that's interesting, I feel like, is a lot of people live here when they're young, in air quotes, and then end up transitioning either out of the city or to other neighborhoods for various reasons. And I think one of them, which is the lead into affordability, but also some programs, right? Some might argue it's easier to raise your kid in the suburbs of Virginia because there's more rec teams, there's more sports, there's various other programs that support children, right, and families, while DC doesn't have them or doesn't have a high standard of that.
Yeah.
So again, giving you experience like working at DPR, do you have any policies in mind or any vision for what you might do as council member to address those concerns from our Ward 2 residents?
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned this. I'm about to announce my full education agenda. But one of the major things that we want to focus on is improving and expanding how we maintain our facilities and make sure that we have modern, clean, and safe spaces, whether it's a school or recreation, but also looking at how do we, especially in our school systems, how do we start to make school climate and belonging part of the metrics of success in a school? How fun is it to be there? I know for me, class was one thing, but I was there to play football. I was there to run track. I was there. I would hang out after school because it was nice. There was a playground. There was little girls you could chase, whatever. When you was a kid, school was an exciting place to be. And I think we've lost track of that, right? Where schools are not as exciting. Families are afraid to leave their kids there. And so we have to invest more in climate and belonging and resources to keep our schools safe. And I also think we've also forgotten about our teachers, frankly. That's what I think most of us remember. I'll never forget. My teachers are who made me who I am. They're the ones who believed in me, who inspired me, who pushed me. But in DC, we have a huge turnover challenge because of the cost of living. And we don't have enough benefits for them as far as housing assistance or childcare, frankly, to stay in the district. So we may bring someone in with a big salary, but as soon as they pay rent for a couple of years, they're like, I'm going to PG County or Woodbridge, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that we are providing more benefits beyond just salary, recognizing that the cost of living here is going to remain a big burden.
Let's talk about affordability. Ward 2, of course, has a lot of condos, a lot of apartments.
Yeah.
Probably the pricier rents in the entire city.
Yep.
Which makes sense for a lot of cases, but as folks want to, be here for a long time, possibly raise a family here, becomes very challenging.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a citywide issue, it's a nationwide issue. What policies are you exploring to address housing affordability in the district?
Yeah. No, affordability is definitely a national issue, and inflation is a huge challenge. But I think DC has an especially different challenge with our cost of living. And I think that is the real big thing that's suffocating so many of us is how do we pay our rent? And when I lived in Ward 2, man, I mean, if I could go back in time, I might take that apartment again. It was a 2-bedroom, me and my buddy John Gilbert, 2-bedroom, 1 bath. We had our own little rooftop, which was amazing, and our own parking for $17.50 a piece.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy, right? To think about that. And I was there for, I think 3.5 years. And the only reason I left is because I wanted to become a homeowner. I was getting old. I can't just rent forever. And I looked at buying the place, and it was like $700,000 for just a condo, which is, it's unfathomable. So I wound up buying in Southeast, and I've been in Southeast ever since, in Anacostia and now Congress Heights. But what I think, as far as affordability goes, there's a few things I want to focus on. One is supply. We need to create more housing supply, and not just high rises, but how do we create more smaller landlord or housing providers that are 4 units, that are 3 units, like the one that I lived in here in Ward 2, where you have a landlord that knows you, that builds a relationship with you, that cares, that wants to keep you there, versus these big high rises where you're just a line on the spreadsheet. So how do we build more housing supply? 2, how do we improve financing and housing assistance? Of course, we have our housing assistance for those who are underemployed or unemployed, but how do we create more home ownership assistance programs? And I think that's really how we make sure that folks who come here, that love the district, or who grew up here, have a chance to stay, is by owning, not just keeping up with the rent as it goes wherever it goes. So how do we create more home ownership assistance financing programs? And then third is preservation. How do we preserve our historic buildings? How do we preserve the home ownership of our elders, helping them with their estate planning? And also, how do we provide grants and supports for people to repair their homes? Because we see so many folks who spiral in repair and homes are condemned or vacant because they can't keep it together, and that hurts the entire neighborhood. So my strategy is building more supply with an emphasis on smaller landlords and smaller housing providers, improving financing for home ownership and rentals, but primarily ownerships, and then focusing on preservation. How do we keep the buildings we have?
One of the things that you talked about was your experience and working with different cities, doing evidence-based practices. And I think you touched on accountability. How would you, as a council member, focus on holding district government accountable, and how would that translate into a better experience for Ward 2 Democrats?
I mean, I think we already have some tools in place with oversight. But what I think from a theoretical standpoint, what we're missing is we consistently compare ourselves to ourselves, and we forget to pick our head up and look at what other cities are doing and how we're comparing to other cities. In 2025, we have the highest unemployment of any major city in the country now. And so how do we get here? It wasn't just the federal layoffs. It's because we lost an historic number of restaurants, 92 restaurants last year.
Yeah.
And so we have to think about, okay, what are we doing to help keep places like Prego Again open? And what resources and supports do they need? What barriers are they facing? How do we make sure that they're here to keep those jobs open? Same thing for hospitality, for tourism. And additionally, I think with oversight, we should just look at all the different metrics of how we're improving the quality of life, and not only compare ourselves for comparison's sake, but also look at those ideas that are helping cities thrive, right? There's a reason why Detroit has made this big bounce back. There's a reason why Baltimore is safer than DC, right? There's a reason why we didn't get the World Cup, right? Like, how do we look at how we're doing versus other cities and push ourselves to a higher level and standard, as opposed to just bickering back and forth about what's not working here?
You mentioned restaurants.
Yes.
Which is a great segue to another question about supporting small businesses. The reason why a lot of people live in Ward 2 is they want to live near restaurants. They want to be able to walk to local shops. They want to be able to experience what it means to live in the city. But too often, as a resident here, when I'm walking by buildings, I'm seeing for lease signs. I'm seeing them for a very long time.
Yeah.
So what kind of policy initiatives do you have in mind to address those issues where it relates to supporting restaurants, supporting small businesses, and or supporting entrepreneurship in the city?
Yeah. So right now, the barrier to entry is really too high for small businesses, especially those that are restaurants. And again, back to other cities, there are so many innovative ways that cities are bringing in businesses that DC hasn't done yet. Right now, it's easier to open a business in Clarendon, Virginia, than it is in DuPont Circle, no matter if you have the money or not. And so we have to think about, how do we start to reduce the permitting times, the different red tapes that we know slow down the opportunity to open business. And also, how do we start to address some of the big fees that we know are really hindering someone at the beginning? And one exciting thing I want to do is push for the first year of fees and permits, those actual dollars being free, right? The first year should be free. Let's give these businesses a chance to thrive and see what they can do. And if they do thrive, that brings more revenue to the city, which will far outweigh the permits that they have to pay for in order to open and start the business. And so I think thinking like that is just really, really helpful. Even in Maryland, if you open a restaurant in Maryland, the government gives you a $2,500 check. Thank you. Right? We're not doing that here. If anything, we're scaring them, right? With extra permits, extra regulations. They're losing their parking. There's so many restrictions that are making it hard for businesses. And we see that in the results of how many are shut down. And as I said earlier, last year, we set a city record for how many restaurants were shut down in the district. And that's more than just places to eat and have fun. That's real jobs that people need, and real service jobs that so many folks need, especially my neighbors in Ward 8.
Yeah, real investment.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, restaurants are not cheap to open or operate.
Right.
And every time one closes, you're watching someone who put a lot of money, a lot of sweat, a lot of effort into something. And every time I see one close, it's just like, obviously it impacts the neighborhood, but also represents like a loss of real investment. You touched a little bit on some of the issues that help people, help restaurants thrive,
Yeah.
including mobility and parking and things
Yeah.
of that nature.
Yeah.
You know, we live in Ward 2, bike lanes are important, walkability is important.
Yep.
In some ways, having scooters around is important,
Yep.
right? So, can you speak a little bit about what you would do as council member to improve mobility and transportation here in Ward 2?
Yeah. I mean, I think the district has looked at traffic safety as a revenue earner more than a tactic for public safety. And that's what I really want to shift, is the culture away from how many tickets do we write and how many fees can we hit people with, to how do we make our streets safer for our pedestrians, for our drivers, for our cyclists, and for folks who use public transit. When I lived in Ward 2, I walked to my favorite restaurants around 5th and K and the Busboys. I used to walk to my rec center. I used to walk up and maybe stumble back from U Street, right? Like everything was on foot, and we enjoyed it. It was great, but I also felt safe to do that. And that's not necessarily the case right now. Folks are speeding through residential areas. You know, we're cutting folks off. And if you are brave enough to cycle, too many folks are risking their lives. 2 of my good friends were hit while riding bicycles in the district. And luckily it wasn't fatal, but that's real trauma, real pain, and real cost. And so I think especially in communities that are not as dependent on automobiles, we should prioritize different forms of transit. But I also will say we have to be strategic, because I live in Ward 8. The majority of my neighbors have to drive, right? Because they don't have the same access to some of the different features that you spoke about. And so we have to think about what is a strategy for each part of the city, neighborhood by neighborhood, prioritize the safety, but also make sure everyone in the district can enjoy what we all love here.
Yeah. And one thing is key there is finding ways to connect neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Right. For a small business like Prego Again, you know, if it's only people in this area that are coming here, their income is limited.
Yeah.
Right. But if folks feel safe coming from Adams Morgan, and think it was a nice bike path here to connect.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Ward 8. You know, there's not many ways to get from Ward 7 or Ward 8 to businesses in Ward 2 in particular, or in Capitol Hill. Sometimes bike lane just ends.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes there's barriers connecting the city. When we first started talking, you talked about your experience in government services.
Yeah.
And holding government accountable is also something we talked about.
Yep.
Ward 2 is that place where you have a lot of restaurants, therefore a lot of trash cans, a lot of rat issues.
Yes.
People are calling about those. There's holes that aren't being filled at my block all the time. You have Christmas trees still on my front area from Christmas. It's April, so just for the record.
Yeah.
Right? So it's an area where larger population, denser population. You have 311 calls probably coming in all the time, but we have residents who are not seeing a lot of things being resolved. So what would you do as a council member to address 311, of course, in the entire city, particularly address some of the high volume that must come from Ward 2 because of our bigger density and population?
Yeah. I mean, look, this is where I started my career in public service, was dealing with constituent concerns, specifically filling potholes, getting trash pickup and bulk trashes and dumping, and all the things that what maybe fell short of is what the Mayor's Office of Community Relations and Services, MOCRS, were charged with doing. And when I first got there, people didn't even know how to use Google Docs. There was no system to track anything. It was like, you call and we'll try to help. But I really tried to modernize how we did that. We implemented Salesforce. We tracked every single case. We compared it to what 311 was saying. And that's really how we start to monitor and have a more data-driven approach to how we address problems. What we also did is we looked at where the 311 calls coming from, what are the trends that we're seeing, and then how can we advise the mayor and really council at that time to put more resources. If we know that alley repair is a consistent challenge throughout this part of the city, then how do we start to move our budgets and our strategies and our plans to react to the people's needs, not just operating like a fire truck where we just drive up and put it out and go back and act like it didn't happen. And so I think that's what, I know that's a lot to say, but when it comes to serving constituents, what we really have to do is push DC agencies to be more proactive and for them to predict and forecast what challenges they have or what communities may have and start to put their resources that way. We saw that with the recent snowstorm, right? Where we all dealt with how the city was not prepared at the time, did not have the resources, but we could have forecasted it. This is not the first blizzard we've ever experienced. And we lost sight of that proactive style of governance where we look at the trends and we really forecast and invest effectively. So that's what I would like to do, frankly. The other big thing about what we did effectively is we had a team that really met residents where they were. So we were at ANC meetings, we were at community meetings, but we were also on social media, right? We were on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and engaging people in different chats. We were in all the email lists. We were making sure that we were seeking out problems, not just waiting for a 311 call to land on our desk. And that is like a tone and a culture that I think has been lost. And while it may have lived in the mayor's office at different times, I've never seen council move like that. And so that's what I want to bring to council, recognizing that we have a responsibility for constituent concerns too.
Yeah.
And we have a team that can help with that work too. And so it's not just on the mayor to make sure your bulk trash or your Christmas trees are picked up. Council can play a role in connecting with agencies. Last thing is, sadly, the way you get things done are relationships. And I am the only candidate that has worked with every agency in DC council. In DC government. And we need those relationships in order to expedite and get things done, but most importantly, to understand how we solve the problems and what it looks like to get your sidewalk repaired or to get that Christmas tree picked up. And I'm the only candidate, I think, that has those relationships to be ready on day one to operate and get things rolling.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was going to say, one challenge I have as I'm trying to help my neighbors address issues they bring up to me is how many layers there are.
Yeah.
It's like I can easily send an email to Brooke Pindo's office, the mayor's office, DPR, name 5 other agencies regarding one issue that hasn't been addressed. Any ideas or best practices in your experience on how to really decentralize and more centralize some of the responses needed to address issues in DC?
I think government should actually be celebrating those who make the most 311 calls. We have to figure out how to shift the culture from, oh, that person complained, that's a bad person, to, no, this is someone who cares.
An active resident.
It's an active resident, and we want to encourage more active residents. And how do we start to incentivize more people reporting and sharing what's going on, recognizing we can't fix it all. But if we have a clear awareness of what it is, we can prioritize and tackle it. We should start to shift the culture where it's not on you to do that, but we actually have more residents pouring into the system, and we can have a better coordination of how we're attacking all these problems. And I'll give you one example. When I was there, we started a thing called Alley Palooza, right? Which was repairing alleys. I think we still do it, right? And man, there's a lot of things I started back then. But back then it was like, well, how do you pick which alley to repair? So you could pick the alley that's in the worst shape, or you could pick the alley that has the most 311 calls, or you could pick the alley that has the most foot traffic. It was a really hard tug of war on how to prioritize, and there's no science to that yet. And I think we wound up doing a mix of that. But imagine if every resident had put in those calls and reports and they were already a part of it, then we'd have a clear picture of how to prioritize based on need and not necessarily on civic engagement or civic connection. And so I think that's just an example of how if we can strengthen people's engagement, we can provide services a little bit more equitably. The other cool thing that we did, which I think you should do as commissioner, when I was there, we started the neighborhood walks, the results walks with the mayor. That's what it was called back then. I think she rebranded it. But you have to go find the issues. And if government is not willing to go find them, then we're dependent solely on resident complaints or resident concerns. And so as a commissioner and as a council member, that would be a thing that I would love to instill, is how do we continue to seek out challenges and problems in neighborhoods that maybe are a little bit quiet because they don't have access or information or education about 311 and the tools that are needed, but probably still have major demands and major needs for service. Yeah.
And one thing I heard you say there is community-based approach.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, can you speak about your experience with community-based approaches and how you would change the culture of community-based approach as a council member?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've done a lot of work in public service. I've, worked in the White House, I pushed bills through Congress and worked in the city. But I think what I'm most proud of is my ability to organize and build community. And I did that with DC for Obama when we got him elected the first time. I created my own flag football league called PBF Sports. I had over 800 athletes. I even host an R&B party once a month called the Set R&B. But all these moments for me have been exciting because it brings folks together to celebrate, to enjoy the city, but often to solve real problems. One thing I did most recently is 3 years ago, I created this network called Ownership Matters, which are homeowners, 2,000 homeowners across the district. And we're working together to help repair our homes, to find the right contractors, to understand different laws and changes. And I think building community helps us as a community solve complex problems and improve our quality of life, but also just enjoy the district that we all are proud to be a part of. That's a big part of who I am as a person. And I think that's something I would love to bring to council more, is bringing the community in and building community around government and policies that we're trying to change.
Yeah, that's great. As we wrap up, is there anything else you want to add? Tell Ward 2 voters and residents before we wrap up this interview.
I appreciate everybody that lives in Ward 2. I'm a little jealous because I get to miss out on the Kramers of the world and the DuPonts and the Pregos. But I will be here as much as often, so please invite me back. And if anybody wants me to come here for anything, let me know, because I'm probably already here for lunch or drinks anyway. But so thankful for this opportunity to talk with you.
No, thanks for sitting down. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome.
And we'll see you on the campaign trail.
Yes, sir.